dad's silent revenge.
At 59, after 32 years of marriage, I walked into that lawyer's office and signed away everything I'd built. My $2.8 million construction company, my house, my entire life's work. The lawyer begged me to stop, but I signed those papers with a smile. Nobody knew I'd already won the moment I put pen to paper. I'm Carl Pierce, and this is how I destroyed the woman who tried to steal my life. For 32 years, I thought I knew my wife, Beverly. We built Pierce Construction together from nothing. Me swinging hammers in the Connecticut heat, her handling the books from our kitchen table in our little ranch house on Maple Street. 2 boys, Keith and Roger, raised right with strong backs and honest values. A business that grew from my beat-up Ford pickup to a fleet of trucks in a warehouse complex off Route 9. I was 59. Beverly was 56, and I figured we'd coast into retirement together in a few years. Shows how much I knew about the woman sleeping next to me. The sign started small last spring. Beverly began staying late at our office on Industrial Drive more often, claiming she was working on new business development strategies with our consultant, Diana Foster. Diana was 35, sharp as a tack, and Beverly had hired her 6 months ago to help us expand into commercial contracts. Our office sits in a converted warehouse, nothing fancy, just functional space with my drafting table, Beverly's desk, and a conference room where we met with clients. I built most of the interior myself, including the oak reception counter I was particularly proud of. Diana's brilliant, Beverly would say, walking through our front door at 9 p.m., smelling like expensive perfume that definitely wasn't the drugstore stuff she usually wore. She's revolutionizing how we approach client relationships. When I asked to meet this miracle worker, Beverly always had excuses. Diana was too busy traveling to meet with potential clients or working on confidential proposals that couldn't be discussed yet. For a guy who'd built his business on handshake deals and looking people in the eye, something felt off. The company credit card statements were the first real red flag. I always reviewed them at our kitchen table every month, spread out next to Beverly's coffee mug and my reading glasses. Fancy restaurants I'd never heard of, places with names like Le Bernardin and the Capitol Grill charged during business meetings that weren't on any calendar I could find. Hotel stays in Hartford when we had no projects anywhere near that city. Wine purchases for $200 a bottle when Beverly and I usually grabbed a 6-pack of Bud Light to share on the back deck. "Beverly," I said one evening in our home office, really just the spare bedroom with filing cabinets lining the walls and a desk by the window overlooking our backyard. I was looking at the statements under the harsh fluorescent light. "What's this $800 dinner at some place in Manhattan?" She barely looked up from her laptop, fingers clicking on the keyboard. "Client entertainment." Diana set it up. "These commercial developers expect a certain level of sophistication. Carl, we can't take them to Applebee's." "Which client?" "The Morrison Group." "You wouldn't know them." I knew every major contractor in 3 states. There was no Morrison Group, at least not one big enough to justify an $800 dinner, but I wanted to believe her. After 32 years, you don't just throw in the towel because your wife orders expensive wine, right? We'd weathered the recession in 2008, raised 2 good sons, built something real together. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in Beverly's desk at the office, looking for the insurance paperwork we needed for a job site inspection. Her desk was always organized, neat stacks of invoices, client files in alphabetical order, pens lined up like soldiers. But tucked behind her business card holder, almost like it was hidden, I found a hotel key card. The Grand Hyatt in Hartford, room 412. There was a handwritten note wrapped around it in feminine handwriting I didn't recognize. "Can't wait for our weekend getaway. Thank you for making me feel alive again. All my love, D." I sat in Beverly's chair for 20 minutes, staring at that keycard and note. The office was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and distant traffic on Route 9. D for Diana, Beverly and Diana. Not client meetings. Not business development. A full-blown affair. 32 years of marriage. 2 sons we'd raised together. A business we'd built from my pickup truck and her kitchen table bookkeeping. And she was throwing it all away for a woman half my age. My hands were shaking as I slipped the keycard and note into my shirt pocket. I drove home to our house on Maple Street in a daze, barely remembering to stop at red lights. Our neighbors were out mowing lawns, living their normal Tuesday lives while mine fell apart. That night I confronted her. No games, no subtle questions. I waited until she got home from another late meeting, then dropped the key card on our dining room table between the salt and pepper shakers. "Who is she to you, Beverly?" My wife's face went through 3 emotions in 5 seconds. Shock, like she'd been slapped. Panic, like a deer in headlights. Then something I'd never seen before, cold calculation, like she was doing math in her head. "I want a divorce," she said, just like that. 32 years dismissed with 4 words. "We can work this out," I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "There's nothing to work out, Carl. Diana and I are in love. We're starting a new life together." "What about the business, the house, everything we built?" Burley smiled, and it wasn't the smile I'd fallen in love with back in 1992. This was predatory, like a shark smelling blood in the water. "The business is in my name, Carl. I've been very careful about that over the years. The house too. Legally, you built nothing. You just swung hammers while I handled the real work." I felt like she'd hit me with a sledgehammer. "Beverly, I founded Pierce Construction in 1992. You helped with paperwork. That's not how the current corporate structure reads. My lawyer will be in touch." She packed 2 suitcases that night, moving through our bedroom like she was checking items off a list. Clothes from the closet we'd shared for decades. Jewelry from the dresser where I kept my work gloves. Just like that, 32 years reduced to 2 pieces of luggage and a taxi waiting in our driveway. The house felt huge and empty after she left. I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd done homework with the boys, planned family vacations, celebrated promotions and new contracts. Now I was eating cereal for dinner and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting across from Terry Anderson in his law office downtown. Beverly's attorney had recommended him, which should have been my first red flag. Nice enough guy in his expensive suit, but he kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Terry looked uncomfortable as he read Beverly's proposed settlement, shifting papers around his polished desk like they might catch fire. "Mr. Pierce, this is barely legal," he said, looking up from the papers, with the expression of a man who'd just stepped in something unpleasant. "She's offering you $100,000 and your personal tools. That's it. From a $2.8 million business and $800,000 in other assets." I stared at the numbers on the settlement papers. After 32 years of marriage and building a business from nothing, Beverly thought my life was worth the price of a decent pickup truck. "What are my chances if we fight?" Terry hesitated, loosening his tie like it was choking him. "Honestly, it's tough. The business incorporation was restructured in her name in 1997. The house deed was changed to her name only in 2003. She's been planning this for decades, Carl. Fighting could take years and cost $200,000 in legal fees." "What if I just sign, Mr. Pierce? I strongly advise against, but I was already reaching for the pen. I saw the exact moment Terry realized what I was doing. His face went white, then red, like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. "Please think about your future," he said desperately, half rising from his chair. "Where will you live? How will you survive on $100,000? I signed the last page and looked up with a smile that confused everyone in that oak-paneled office. "Don't worry, Terry," I said softly. "I know exactly what I'm doing. See, what nobody knew was that I'd already won. They just didn't realize it yet." I drove from Terry's office to my new apartment on the other side of town. 1 bedroom, thin walls. View of a parking lot where teenagers practiced skateboard tricks. At 5D9, this cramped space with its beige carpet and flickering bathroom light was supposed to be my new life. For about 10 minutes, sitting on a folding chair I'd picked up at Walmart, I felt sorry for myself. Then I got to work. I pulled out my filing cabinet, one of the few things I'd managed to take from the house before Beverly changed the locks. For 32 years, I'd kept every receipt, every permit, every contract, every piece of paper related to our business. Beverly used to tease me about it at neighborhood barbecues. Carl in his filing system, she'd laugh, beer in hand, while our neighbors nodded politely. He's got records going back to the Bush administration. The first Bush. She wasn't laughing now. I spent that entire night going through files spread across my tiny kitchen table. My back ached from hunching over documents under the harsh overhead light. My eyes burned from squinting at faded receipts and carbon copies, but I kept searching because I knew what I was looking for. The original business registration from 1992, Pierce Construction Company, sole proprietor, Carl Pierce. My name, my signature, filed at the Connecticut Secretary of State's office when I was 27 years old and full of dreams. Business licenses from 1992 through 1996, all in my name only. Beverly wasn't even listed as an employee back then. Insurance documents from the early years listing me as the sole business owner, back when we could barely afford the premiums. Tax returns from 1992 through 1996 showing business income under my social security number, filed from our kitchen table with Beverly helping but not as a partner. But the real gold mine was in a manila folder marked early correspondence in my careful handwriting. Letters I'd written to suppliers on Pierce Construction letterhead. Contracts I'd signed with my first big clients, permit applications in my own handwriting submitted to the town building department. All of it proving that Beverly hadn't handled the real work. I had built this company with my own hands, my own brain, my own reputation earned one honest job at a time. Beverly's corporate restructuring in 1997? I found those papers too, buried in our files like a smoking gun. There was even a note from her lawyer about asset protection strategies and optimizing tax advantages for potential future scenarios. She'd been planning this divorce for 27 years, moving pieces around the board like some kind of chess master. But here's the thing about being a contractor for 32 years. You learn to read the fine print. You learn that the devil's always in the details. Beverly's restructuring had one fatal flaw. She'd assumed I was too stupid to understand corporate law. She'd assumed that a guy who swung hammers for a living couldn't possibly outthink a woman with an associate's degree in business administration. She was dead wrong. The next morning, I called a different lawyer. Not Terry. He'd seen me sign those papers and would think I'd lost my mind completely. I needed someone who didn't know about my surrender, someone who could look at this mess with fresh eyes. Glenn Martinez had a reputation around Connecticut legal circles, expensive as hell, aggressive as a pit bull, and known for winning cases everyone else thought were hopeless. My son Keith had mentioned him once, said a buddy's dad had used him in a nasty divorce and walked away with everything. I'd like to schedule a consultation, I told his secretary from the phone in my cramped apartment kitchen. It's regarding a divorce settlement. Mr. Martinez's calendar is quite full, but we might have an opening next month. I have original business registration documents proving sole ownership of a $2.8 million company that my wife claims she built. I also have evidence she's been embezzling company funds for an affair, and I signed away everything yesterday, but the papers haven't been filed yet. There was a long pause. I could hear papers shuffling, maybe a calendar being flipped. Can you be here at 2:00 today? Glenn Martinez operated out of a corner office in a glass tower downtown, the kind of place that screamed expensive legal advice. He was in his 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He listened while I explained everything: the affair, Beverly's threats, my signing of the documents the day before, and the cardboard box of evidence I'd lugged up from the parking garage. His office smelled like leather and coffee, with law books lining the walls and a view of the Connecticut River through floor-to-ceiling windows. Glenn spent over an hour going through my files without speaking, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. Finally, he leaned back in his executive chair and looked at me like I was the most interesting thing he'd seen all week. "Carl, do you know what you've done?" My heart sank into my boots. Made the biggest mistake of my life? No. A slow smile crossed his face, the kind of expression a poker player gets when he realizes he's holding a royal flush. You've given yourself the perfect position. You signed under duress with inadequate representation and without full disclosure of marital assets. More importantly, you signed yesterday, but the papers haven't been filed yet. He tapped my original business registration with his expensive pen. When did they plan to file? Beverly's lawyer said next week. They needed to process everything properly. Perfect. He held up the faded document from 1992. This changes everything, and Beverly telling you the business was solely hers because you'd never contributed in front of witnesses. That's called fraudulent concealment, and judges hate it. Glenn leaned forward, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Carl, you haven't lost anything. You've laid a trap, and your wife walked right into it." Glenn Martinez didn't waste time or mince words. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, he'd outlined a strategy that made my head spin and my pulse quicken. "First, we file a motion to set aside the settlement," he explained, writing notes while he talked. "We'll claim duress, inadequate representation, and failure to disclose assets. But here's the key. We don't just defend. We attack. Attack how? We're filing for forensic accounting of the business. Every transaction for the past 10 years. If Beverly's been hiding money or using business funds for personal expenses, like those expensive dinners with Diana, we'll find every penny. He smiled like a shark. And based on what you've told me about hotel stays and jewelry purchases, I'd bet my law degree she's been treating your business account like her personal piggy bank. The next morning, Glenn filed the paperwork at the courthouse on Church Street. By noon, Beverly's lawyer, Nancy Williams, was on the phone, and Glenn's secretary could hear her shouting from across the office. She's furious. Glenn told me when he called my apartment that afternoon. Nancy wants to know why you retained new counsel and what you think you're doing. What did you tell her that my client has reconsidered the settlement after discovering evidence of asset concealment and marital fraud? I also informed her we'll be deposing Mrs. Pierce about the business finances and her relationship with Miss Diana Foster. I heard Glenn's chair creak as he leaned back. Oh, and Carl, I know everything now. Diana Foster, 35 years old, works as a business consultant. They've been seeing each other for approximately 2 years. Beverly's been paying for a Hartford apartment using business funds, $2,400 a month for the past 18 months. 2 years. While I'd been planning our retirement, maybe a trip to see the Grand Canyon, Beverly had been building a whole separate life with a woman young enough to be our daughter. Are you all right? Glenn asked. Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. The initial shock had passed, replaced by something colder and more determined. What happens next? Next, we wait for them to make a move. And Carl, they will make a move. Beverly thought she had everything sewn up tight. Now she's going to panic. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Beverly. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken since the night she'd packed her bags and called that taxi. But curiosity won out. Carl. Her voice was tight, controlled like she was gripping the phone too hard. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. You hired Glenn Martinez. She spat his name like it left a bad taste in her mouth. What are you trying to prove? The settlement was fair. Fair. I actually laughed, sitting up in my narrow apartment bed. You tried to steal everything I built over 32 years. You called $100,000 fair for half a lifetime of work. You signed the papers willingly. I signed under duress with incomplete information. My new lawyer explained that to your lawyer, didn't he? Long silence on the other end. I could picture Beverly in that Hartford apartment I'd been paying for, probably pacing around expensive furniture bought with my money. Carl, you're 59 years old. Do you really want to spend your final working years in court fighting over money? We could resolve this amicably. Like you resolved our marriage amicably by having a 2-year affair with a woman young enough to be our daughter. I heard her sharp intake of breath. How did you— Never mind how. Beverly, be reasonable. The business is mine. I built it. We built it. I interrupted. I have the original registration papers from 1992. Pierce Construction Company owned by Carl Pierce. Remember that? Or have you conveniently forgotten? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When Beverly finally spoke, her voice had lost its certainty. Those papers don't mean anything, she said. But I could hear the doubt creeping in. I restructured the business legally in 1997, after I'd worked there for 5 years as the owner. My lawyer is very interested in why you restructured it, and he's even more interested in the $320,000 you've been siphoning from business accounts to pay for your affair. You can't prove— I can prove everything, Beverly. I have 32 years of records. Every receipt, every bank statement, every document. You used to joke about my filing system at neighborhood barbecues. You're not laughing now, are you? Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. Desperate. You're making a mistake, Carl. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is trusting you. I hung up and sat in my apartment kitchen, hands still shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was adrenaline, the same feeling I got when framing a tricky roof or making a difficult measurement. I'd crossed the point of no return, and it felt like stepping into sunlight after months in shadow. The forensic accountant's report arrived 3 weeks later. Glenn called me to his office, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice before I even walked through his door. Carl, your instincts were dead on. Beverly has been systematically embezzling from the business for years. He slid a thick document across his polished desk. Over the past 3 years alone, she's diverted approximately $320,000 to personal use, almost all of it related to her affair with Diana. I stared at the numbers laid out in neat columns. Hotel stays at the Grand Hyatt and other expensive places, restaurants I couldn't pronounce the names of, jewelry purchases from stores I'd never heard of, Even a car lease, a silver BMW registered in Diana's name, paid for monthly from our business account. She used our business, I said slowly, the full scope of the betrayal hitting me. The business we built together to fund her affair. Yes, and that's not all. She's also been undervaluing the business in her financial disclosures. She claimed it's worth $1.8 million to justify that insulting settlement offer. Our analysis suggests it's closer to $2.8 million. That afternoon, Glenn filed an amended complaint adding charges of financial fraud and misappropriation of marital assets. He also requested an emergency freeze on all business accounts until the matter was resolved. The response was immediate and vicious. At 8 p.m. that night, my son Keith called from his apartment across town. "Dad, Mom just called me. She's furious, saying terrible things about you, that you're trying to destroy her, that you're being vindictive and cruel. What do you think, son?" Keith was quiet for a moment. "I think she's scared, Dad. I remember you teaching me to frame walls when I was 12. I remember you up at 5 a.m. every day, for 32 years, building that business from nothing. Whatever she's claiming now, I know the truth." His brother Roger called an hour later with similar news. Both my boys were standing with me, and that meant more than any amount of money ever could. The trial began on a cold December morning at the Superior Courthouse on Church Street. I sat beside Glenn at the plaintiff's table, watching Beverly and Nancy Williams enter the courtroom. Deanna wasn't there. She'd been subpoenaed to testify later in the week, and from what Glenn had told me, she was nervous about what that might mean for her cozy setup. Judge Helen Parker presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor wax, with high ceilings that made every sound echo. Nancy started with her opening statement, painting Beverly as the business-minded partner who'd managed Pierce Construction, while I focused on manual labor and field operations. Then Glenn stood up, straightening his tie with the confidence of a man holding all the aces. "Your Honor, this is a case about theft, not just of money but of credit and recognition. The evidence will show that Carl Pierce didn't just swing hammers. He founded, built, and managed a multi-million-dollar construction company for 32 years, while his wife systematically erased his contributions and embezzled company funds for an extramarital affair." Over the next 3 days, Glenn methodically built our case like he was constructing a building. Foundation first, then walls, then roof. He presented the original 1992 business registration, the permits and licenses in my name, the correspondence proving my role as company founder and manager. My former supervisor from the early days, now 78 years old and walking with a cane, testified about my reputation in the construction community. 3 former employees confirmed my hands-on management style and Beverly's limited operational role. Then came Dr. Joyce Taylor, the forensic accountant. She walked Judge Parker through Beverly's financial irregularities with devastating precision, pointing to charts and graphs projected on a screen that made the theft impossible to deny. Over the past 3 years, Mrs. Pierce diverted approximately $320,000 from business accounts to personal use. She testified in a clear, professional voice that cut through the courtroom like a blade. This includes luxury hotel stays, expensive restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, and vehicle lease payments, all related to her extramarital relationship. I watched Beverly's face as the numbers were laid bare. She looked like she might be sick. When Beverly took the stand, Glenn's cross-examination was surgical. He had her read her own signature from documents that proved she'd known I was the business owner, then watched her try to explain why she'd later claimed otherwise. "Mrs. Pierce, you co-signed this business loan in 1994 as spouse of business owner, correct?" "Yes, but, and this permit application from 1996, where you signed as wife of contractor, were you lying then, or are you lying now?" Judge Parker delivered her ruling on a Friday afternoon. The courtroom was packed. Keith and Roger sat behind me, along with several current and former employees who'd taken time off work to support me. "This is one of the clearest cases of marital fraud I've encountered," Judge Parker said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "The evidence overwhelmingly shows that Carl Pierce founded and built Pierce Construction Company, while Beverly Pierce attempted to steal credit for his life's work. She looked directly at Beverly. Therefore, I'm awarding Mr. Pierce 80% ownership of the business, valued at $2.8 million. Mrs. Pierce must also reimburse the marital estate for the $320,000 she embezzled, plus Mr. Pierce's legal fees, totaling $180,000 in dollars and Beverly whispered urgently to Nancy, but Judge Parker wasn't finished. By my calculation, Mr. Pierce is awarded assets totaling approximately $2.06 million. Mrs. Pierce may keep her personal belongings and whatever remains after satisfying this judgment. The gavel struck once, final and decisive. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my own house again, not the one on Maple Street, which I sold, but a comfortable place on the lake with a workshop out back. Beverly declared bankruptcy 2 months after the trial. Deanna left her the week the judgment was announced, apparently deciding that love wasn't worth living in a studio apartment. At 59, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning again. I've got good years left, a business that's thriving, and the respect of my sons. These days, I wake up every morning in my own house, running the business I built with my own hands. Keith and Roger stop by the office regularly, learning the trade I'm proud to pass down. Beverly learned the hard way that 32 years of partnership means something in a court of law. Justice served cold tastes pretty damn good. What would you have done in my situation? Sometimes the smartest move isn't fighting back immediately. It's letting someone think they've already won while you gather the ammunition to destroy them completely. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself, even at 59. The people who try to steal your life's work are counting on you being too tired, too old, or too scared to fight back. Prove them wrong.